Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to another coffee talk on a very snowy day. I trust yesterday you were able to shovel yourselves out. Maybe you just stayed home and said, you know what, it's not worth it. And that's, kudos for you. That's wonderful. I know my kids wish they could do that. They were so jealous on Wednesday morning watching the news and seeing like all of their cousins are home from school today.
Yep.
And it's like...
On the island.
On the island, yes. All of their island cousins. And I didn't look, we switched it off before we got to the lower mainland because they have cousins in Langley, so maybe all of their cousins, but certainly all of their island cousins are home on Wednesday. And that's super bad grammar. Are past tense, whatever. Anyways, the snow's making us crazy, but we're glad to stop and pause and share some coffee and some information with you and make sure that we, as a church family, even when we're snowed inside or whether we're out and about, we are able to stay connected as a family. And so, first we like to look back. Last Sunday, Jeff, you led us through looking at the calling of Abraham, which... I know as we've started to talk through Moses a little bit, it's sort of like there is so much material on these people that God has called, and sometimes, he refines that calling as we go along, but it can be big and it can be hard to kind of narrow it down. But so you've kind of focused in on the journey, the beginning of the journey, the call to the journey. And I thought, before we go there, I have shared this story with some people before. There was a point in time where Sheena and I were on a road trip. Back then, we had only one child. And we were making our journey without GPS. We did not own a GPS at this point, but we got to Portland, and I like to say that the city of Portland broke us because we got so lost.
Yep.
And as soon as we got home, we bought a GPS the very next Black Friday. And so, and have had much better success in our journeys with GPS. But I just...
So, sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead, jump in.
That just brings back memories of maps to me, right? And I used to remember my dad with his map on his lap, trying to get the folds to make the open part in the right place while he's driving. Just like, and he did. He was able to do it, right? And then I used to, be able to do that too before all the restrictions of don't drive with distraction. But that's what you did. You found the map. You did it. You looked up. You looked down. So
definitely, I remember on our honeymoon, Sheena and I were in Southern California. We were in the greater Los Angeles area, and she was navigating. She had the map, and I was driving, and I kept trying to look at the map too. And we're still alive.
You have memories like that too?
Well, actually, mine is a little bit different. We actually we have a couple of them, but the bigger thing was we would watch The Amazing Race.
Oh, yeah.
And we would see how couples would just tear each other apart. And then we realized, you know what? Like, there was one time we did go to Vancouver, and I loved when our friend was taking us around the city, and I was in the back seat, Alana and her were in the front seat talking, and I just had the map and I was just following us all the way along, and I'm like, this is so much fun. You guys can just talk. So then we realized Alana grew up in South Calgary. Traffic for her is nothing, and so she, as long as she has an idea of where we're going, then she can handle everything around her. She also multitasks better than I do. So we figured out if we ever got onto Amazing Race, that I would be the navigator and she would be the driver, because there's not a lot of situations I think that would cause her any. She's an amazing driver. She grew up in Saskatchewan as well too. So snow, whatever, doesn't matter. She could handle it. So I feel like we play to our strengths in that kind of way. Yeah. I do remember. There was a couple of times where, following GPS and it, put us in terrible positions, and it just didn't quite get us where we were supposed to. And, I would much rather, because the amount of times where I'm doing this and no, I gotta see. So I just, now, we have our GPS in the front, on the thing. So I watch that and I'm good to go. But
I definitely love those signs you see in some construction zones that are like, do not follow, for next 200 or next 2 kilometers, do not follow GPS. Because, they realigned the road and they don't want someone going, oh, I'm supposed to be there, and then all of a sudden in the construction zone. And those always make me smile a little bit, because I'm like, can you not use common sense and GPS at the same time? But I guess...
No. GPS will always win out because we trust the computer more. But because our house on Google is about 300 meters that way, according to Google.
Yeah.
And we're down here, and we always see people that try to find our house, and we're like, yeah, I know Google says to go to there. You got to keep coming, keep coming, keep coming. Okay, now you're here.
One of the, as I think back to our road trip last summer, one of the days where I wish I had a working GPS, we were in downtown Toronto. And the plan was simple. I dropped Sheena and the kids off out front of the Scotiabank Arena. They're going to walk like 3 blocks over to the Hockey Hall of Fame. I'm tasked with driving the RV then over and picking them up.
The giant RV.
Well, it's by RV standards a small RV, but for downtown Toronto standards, twice as big as I would have wanted. And there was tons of so I set the GPS for how to get there. Totally fine. Problem is, I get there. There's nowhere to park near there. So I'm driving around looking for then I'm driving around looking for a place to pull over. Nothing. So I ended up like many kilometers away, and I haven't been able to reprogram my GPS yet because there's nowhere to stop safely, pull over, and do it, right? And I'm the only one in the vehicle. So I'm now driving blind in like downtown Toronto area going, which way should I go? Does this look good? Can I go there? And then all of a sudden there's like, I'm about to turn and there's a guy with a construction. I'm like, oh, guess I'm not turning. And it was like a nightmare. By the time I eventually was able to circle back, they're like, what took so long? I'm like, oh, don't.
Just get in the car.
Steering wheel, like, don't you dare, don't. It was an awful morning, but it was. I was happy for them. I'm glad they got to see some really cool stuff. I was not happy for me because I could have really used a navigator. And I have us go in this direction because I think sometimes when we take journeys, we wish God was a little bit more like our GPS, right? And
a good GPS.
A good GPS, yes. Because I will say, the using common sense and that got me in trouble sometimes this summer too, where Sheena would be programming the GPS for us, and she always did an awesome job of that. That was great. And sometimes I would go, I think we're supposed to go here, and she'd be like, but the GPS said wait 400 meters. Like, why are you turning here? I'm like, oh, it looked like this was the spot. No, I should have just waited and trusted the GPS, and we would have been a lot better off. But we want to follow God, and I think we want God to be like that GPS that will tell us, okay, in 400 meters, turn right. And that's just not always, that's just not how it seems to be, right? Following Jesus all these years now, I cannot say that he's been so concrete. It's more like what he says again and again is, okay, turn ahead, I'm with you. And it's like, well, which way do I go? I'm with you, right? And we have. I love that you took us through the promises that God made to Abraham, because that seems to be the number one promise again and again. It will be, I will bless you. Great, cool. What does that look like? Well, it looks like God with us, and it looks like His presence. It looks like His consistency. It looks like His enduring, always being for us and with us, And I think that's more, we might want something to be so clear step by step, but I think what we often get is more a constant presence, and may that reassure us. But what comes to your mind then when you think about how God travels with us in this life? Like where does your experience and thoughts take you there?
Just that sense of I will be with you, and like it's, going back to marriage as well too, I don't have to reassure my wife every day that I love her, because I actually did promise that, at the very beginning. Yeah, it's good to hear that. It's, a really important thing to actually be remembering that and refocusing on that. But I made that promise, and I will keep that promise, right? God makes that promise at the beginning of Abraham's life, at the beginning of Abram's call,
right.
And He carries that forward, and that's technically the foundation that Abram should be able to just move forward in on. But then there's always that kind of doubt, well, does he? That kind of wavering. We see some ups and downs in Abram's life as he goes on, but even in that promise, the promise is solid, the promise is there, and yet what kind of carries him forward, and maybe this is jumping to the end too much, but like that just speaks so much more volumes about that Hebrews 11 passage, where it says, he just kept waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting, and he never saw the full completion of the promises fulfilled. Not just the great nation, yes, he saw the promise of his son, but he never saw the promise of the great nation until many years later, long after this nation became huge. But not only that, like, he never saw the fullness of God's promise in Christ, like he pointed us to, right? Like that. So how many times does God give us a promise and say, okay, now wait, but you're not going to see the end?
Yeah.
Like that would be a tough one. Like, hey, your kids will come to know Christ as Lord, but you're never going to see it. That would be a tough one, right? Like, to say, it'll be long after you're gone.
That's great. When you asked that question, for me, it was very similar to what you said, but John 15 came to mind. Remain in me. I am the vine, you are the branches, and I think I get what you were saying. I don't think you're saying that, well, Anna, I promised you I don't have to say it again, because those daily things. and I think that's what God does promise at the beginning, but he also promises, I will be with you today, and I'll be with you today. And the reminders are everywhere in front of us.
Right. Maybe what I'm saying is we don't have to get remarried every single day.
Right. We don't have to commit. Yeah.
We don't have to recommit every single day in order for us to be remembering that initial promise, because the initial promise was there, and it was secure, and it was foundation.
And which leads to the idea that we kind of started to touch on a little bit on Sunday, is God is calling us into not so much of a task, but of a relationship, of a way of being, right? And that's the remain in me part that really resonates with me, is like, we're called to be a branch in the vine, and when we're focused on him, and when we are just in that relationship, we will produce fruit. We will kind of start to have his heart and know, oh, this is someone I'm seeing in front of me that I need to reach out to right now, or he'll put it on our heart. This is someone you need to repair a relationship with, or whatever it is. So
No, and I love that you kind of brought all that together. And when we look at Abraham, however we want to pronounce that, it's funny. Like it's like Abraham.
Yeah.
I said to the youth, it's really funny that his name ends with Ham, given he could, his descendants wouldn't be able to eat pork. It's just the tip of we just see the beginning of everything. Like, so much of, you start talking about God reminding us of his faithfulness and his presence, and then my mind jumps to how the Israelites were instructed at certain places to pile rocks.
Yeah.
And that would be a reminder of what God did there. And so, I could picture roaming around, the land and being like, there's a reminder. And, we'll go a few hundred meters and, there's another reminder. And, because we forget, and though God would say it continually, I am with you, he also said, let's build these reminders.
Which is interesting. Sorry, but my mind goes communion. We have those rocks, right?
That's
and
right.
It's communion
every month we do.
Gathering
do this in remembrance of me.
Yeah. Sorry.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. These things that we do to remind us of God's presence, his faithfulness, and his love, and yet, Abraham just started it, and yet. Look at God's promise. I think even in some of the verses we looked at on Sunday, right? I will bless you, and all people will be blessed through you. That's an incredible promise that God's going to do something great through his people. But that only just begun in Abraham's day, was just barely started, and yet when we look back on what Scripture records, we start to see, this group of outsiders was, brought into God's, communion and relationship with God, and this group of outsiders were brought in, and this group of outsiders were brought in. All these people who had no idea of the one true God, all were brought into that community and were blessed in that way. And I think one of the questions I get, we used to as parents get from our kids again and again, is, well, what does it mean? The Bible says blessed. What does that mean? And I think more and more, it's the ultimate expression of God's love, which is through Jesus, a relationship with him. And that's kind of begun in a new way with Abraham, and I'm excited that we're going to keep looking at other people who were called by God, but in some way, most of them were, they're part of that family and that community. And so they're already in that, right? They're already in that relationship. They already experienced the blessing, and then God adds something new for them specifically. And so, I don't know if we have anything else you want to add as we wrap up our look back. But
yeah, I mean, we're just excited to keep moving. Sunday's Moses, so yeah.
Spoiler. We already said that.
Yeah.
So I look forward to seeing you on Sunday. But a few things, at least one major thing that you need to be aware of this week is mark your calendars, plan ahead. February 11 is going to be our church general meeting. It's going to be at 12:30. So come for the service, stay for soup, and then stay a little bit longer for our meeting. And we're going to have a nice morning of worship, fellowship, and business, which is also worship and fellowship all together. It really is. It's not like, oh, now we put our serious hats on. No, we still continue to be the people of God that meet in this place, and there's just some business to take care of.
Seeking His call.
Yeah, whether you're a member or not, you're invited to attend that and be part of the discussion. And if you are a member, then there will be some things to vote on. So we would really love to have you here. One of the things we're going to be voting on is new members, people who have said, I want to be part of this. I want to seek membership. And so we'll hear testimonies, and then we'll look forward to increasing our number in that way. Anything else coming up that people need to? I think that's the big thing. Is
that's
the 11th.
Big thing that we want people to make sure they hear. So maybe we'll limit that to that today. But
perfect. Well, then we hope to see you Sunday. If not, we'll see you very soon. We hope. Have a great week.